This episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents is brought to you by Andy G. from DC. He wants to shout out Imcell, his Delta Green group. Thanks for always being willing to try weird new games with me. Looking forward to running God's Teeth once I finish school. Thank you for supporting, and may Bast always bless your hunts. Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents, Season 3, Episode 7. This is our episode on Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition. This is the most recent core edition of Vampire, as of this recording. It is published, copyright 2019 for the second printing, I believe, originally published in 2018. Written primarily developed by Kenneth Hite and Karim Muammar. There's of course, many additional writers on this, and it was a team.
Big old team.
Of course, Vampire the Masquerade has a long and storied history in tabletop role-playing games dating back decades.
1991.
Here's a question.
Here's
a question, James.
Greg.
Do you think there is a role-playing game other than Dungeons & Dragons that has as much name recognition, but which also started as a role-playing game? So, you can kick out your Warhammer fantasy roleplay. You can, or your Warhammer 40K, I guess. And you can exclude Star Wars, Star Trek, other licensed properties. Is Vampire the second biggest? Is it the 400-pound? Well, it'd be like the 100-pound gorilla in the room.
I'm pretty sure it is. I think the only other one that comes close is Shadowrun. Rifts, perhaps, but Rifts within the games community has currency. I think the moment you go outside the games community, nobody's heard of Rifts.
Right.
But Shadowrun, partly because of the video games, but just because of its general sort of vibe, I think, yes, there is name recognition there. Because of the game, not because of the short-lived TV series, but the game and everything that came with it, the cosplay, the LARPing,
Shadowrun had a TV series?
No, sorry, Vampire.
I was going to say, how did I not know this? How do I not already hate this abomination against everything I hold dear?
Oh. No, Shadowrun had those really weird little video clips that were used to promote it in the early 90s. And when I say video, I mean shot on video, very obviously.
I don't remember these.
We will link to them in the show notes.
You know what? That sounds like something to do in one of our live streams.
Are they bad, James? Were they bad videos?
They're very good.
Were they what you British call video nasties?
No.
They were not good to start with, and they have aged badly.
I say they've aged like fine wine, but that's just me. Both have had many video games with some quite popular, and Vampire the Masquerade, of course, had Bloodlines, which is a cult classic at this point, one of the higher, more well-regarded Western role-playing games ever made in terms of its storytelling and complexity, not to mention numerous novels and mobile games and all kinds of
I wrote two.
Yeah, the CCG,
the CCG, yes.
Which, weren't we talking about that the other week when... Oh, no, I was talking with someone else about...
You have other friends, Greg?
Not just other friends, but other friends I talk about game design with. This isn't enough for my appetite for rules noodling. But we were talking about why games where it's everyone can attack everyone have problems. And the problem is... you wind up playing the players and not the rules, where it's like, I just need to be consistently in second place until it's time to make my move. And that Richard Garfield designed the Vampire trading card game after getting fed up with this dynamic, where he's like, I can win any game because any game where it's everybody bite the lead dog in the ass, because I've seen the patterns. And he's like, so I'm going to make a game where you're always attacking the guy on your left and getting attacked by the guy on your right. And that'll mellow it out.
And attacking other people in the game is very much what Vampire the Masquerade is about to a large degree. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. It's a game about being a predator. Yeah, we should begin our discussion with what the game does. And Greg, you are probably the most qualified person to talk about that.
I was just going to ask, which editions did you work on, Greg?
I worked on Requiem mostly, and the Masquerade, I think it was third, that was right before Requiem.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see the process whereby when they're making Requiem, they're like, okay, this is our chance to unfuck what we fucked up. And this is our chance to, not step on the missing stairs that we didn't know were missing, but now do. And I have this distinct memory of working on Requiem, and when it came out, the reaction online was half the people were saying, oh my God, they nerfed celerity. This is the greatest thing ever. And the other half were saying, oh my God, they nerfed celerity. This is the worst thing ever. And there were a lot of things like that where it's like, if this is your favorite, if it's your favorite thing, it's probably someone else's least favorite thing, which is, I'm sure, as a game developer, hard to deal with when you're doing a new edition or a new version.
I think it's one of the standard problems with doing a new edition. It's who do you listen to about what needs to be changed, what stays in, what goes out, what gets rewritten. Certainly we ran into it with Paranoia, where stuff that we, as three British designers, were absolutely convinced was outmoded and nobody had found funny for 10 years, people, it turned out, were incredibly invested in. Like the commies, at the time, I'm going to digress, at the time Paranoia came out, 1984, the Cold War was still hot, and commies were a real threat. The threat of nuclear war was still real, so commies felt like a real adversary. By the time we came to do our new edition, communism was long gone, and, it was, the joke was, silly people in furry hats. And so we went, no, how do we make that scary again? It turns out that was not what people wanted.
It's, I think, different in America. There's this absolutely weird cultural pre-rational hatred of not just the concept of communism, but anything that gets called communism.
Mm-hmm.
It's really wild, James. You would freak out and be disgusted
if you describe various government policies and just describe them without mentioning the word communism or socialism. People are like, oh, that sounds great, and then as soon as well, that's a socialist policy they do in Scandinavia or whatever, they're like, oh, that's terrible. I hate it. Yeah, there's also this whole thing about nostalgia. Once a thing has been established in person's minds, that it becomes sort of
crystallized,
fossilized, crystallized, fossilized. And changing it is just, verboten.
Yeah.
But
I think,
how dare you attack my childhood by changing this thing that, and part of the, I'm not very nostalgic, and I don't get very nostalgic. And I remember designing some randomized, it was for Rein, actually. I'm doing the one role character generation for Rein. And I'm telling someone, I want this to be as exciting and interesting as when I was rolling up D&D characters when I was in like 7th grade. And he just looked at me and he's like, but you're not in 7th grade. You may not be able to recapture that feeling because life has been smashing you for decades. And similarly, the people who are have that kind of toxic nostalgia of everything was better, black, blah, 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 blah. When you ask them, like, okay, when were things better? You'll usually they'll name a decade when they were children and when adults were making a concerted effort to not tell them about, the Cuban Missile Crisis or, the civil right or the Watts riots or whatever was going on actually at the time. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of time for nostalgia. And yet, here's Vampire coming into its 5th edition.
Yeah, and being someone who played Vampire back in the 90s and...
did you ever wear eyeliner?
No, I was too young for that. And also in the early 2000s, the old World of Darkness, the original World of Darkness, because now there's multiple iterations of the World of Darkness. You have to specify which one it is. The joke is that we were playing superheroes with fangs. And that was very much the cliche. And
that is, well, one of the things I listed under our traditional question of what's it do. I'm like, politics or supers with fangs. And then I had a little asterisk and said, well, really, it's more like walking tall with corsets.
Mm-hmm.
Or angstish personal morality melodrama. Or freaky bleaky edgelord id wallows. Or the combo platter. It can contain multitudes. If you want to play it as, oh, yeah, you know, we're going to be the vampires who feed on corrupt cops and, you know, kick stoop rats off their stoops, and we rule these streets, and you're better off getting bled by Ivan the Terribly Cool than you are by
one of the Rasputins, of which there are many in the old World of Darkness.
You're better off with us than you are with the Cosa Nostra or one of the Mexican cartels. And so that's the supers with fangs approach. Or you can do it as, well, you know, okay, I'm now a being that is a walking moral abomination. In order to survive, I must inflict harm on others. There is no way to justify this with Kantian ethics. There's no way to justify this with utilitarian ethics unless you get really cute with it. And, you know, suddenly you're the vampire lord of Omelas. And it's like, man, what? I'm just trying to do harm reduction with my blood drinking, which is something I had a ton of fun with in the novels. You get, the character who's at first is like, well, I'm just going to go to clubs and use my vampire hotness and perky tits to pick up horrible guys, and then I'll just feed from them. But because she doesn't really respect or like these guys, when she's in the process, she's like, well, take a little more. Whoops. Yep. Oh, man. Now I got to call Dad's friend who hides bodies. And so she has this moral crisis. And after that is like, I'm only going to feed off men who remind me of my brother so that I don't go too far and accidentally corpse them.
The most interesting thing about this edition of Vampire the Masquerade, being familiar with the old one, is that it places the fact of being a predator and having to prey on other people as a central game element, which the old Vampire the Masquerade didn't, because there are a lot of game mechanics that are about, like, literally in character creation onward. It's about how you got to get blood frequently. How are you going to do it? What is it going to cost you?
And you're always going to be a little hungry unless you kill them. But if you kill them, then you get a stain. And the more stains you get, the more your humanity drops. And this was what I found interesting. I'm like, the lower your humanity, the less sexually capable you are. And I'm like, oh, wow, now we've got stakes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now we are risking something that people actually care about a lot.
Players take that stuff really seriously.
Yeah.
My vampire power fantasy definitely would involve being the sexiest guy around. And so it's like, oh, yeah, here's a little joke that God played on you, Mr. Vampire. You're the sexiest guy around who can't experience sex. Yuck, yuck.
Yeah, I had a playtest of a game that I was really pleased with, in which you were not vampires. You discovered that you were duplicates of your actual real-world selves. So you were playing yourselves, except you weren't. You were you were a mass of alien tissue that thought it was you. And one of the things the players discovered in episode 3 or episode 4 was they were all impotent. You know, this mass of muscle had no, could not perform sex. It could perform, but would derive no enjoyment, or there was no purpose to it. And we never got to the next episode. Players just noped out at that point.
They're like, wait. So sex is now nothing but embarrassing sounds and facial expressions.
Pretty much, yeah. And apologizing. Yeah.
By escapist power fantasy, no.
Congrats on tanking the game, Rommel.
Yeah.
Just going back briefly to those mechanics, are those new for 5th edition? Because I'm familiar with 2 editions of Vampire. I'm familiar with the very first printing of the 1st edition and this new one that we've read for this podcast. And nothing in between. So I have no idea how it's evolved. I can tell you they are very different, and they approach the subject in a very different way, structurally quite similar. But are those thirst mechanics and the humanity stuff and the you must feed and you all of that, is that new for this?
It has evolved to this point.
Oh yeah, humanity and frenzy has always been there. Like, you could always lose control, the beast inside you, and your humanity was your wow. Yeah. You get to be a player character and not a mindless monster ravening through the night until you get staked or exposed to sunlight. But the feeding itself was just like, oh, make a skill roll. All right, you're fine.
Okay. But yeah, the humanity stuff was always always in there. And Greg, what you were saying about the dynamic, the way certainly I saw it played more than once is we are going to do horrible things and then we're going to feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that was the dynamic. And that was fine. That works really well in a role-playing dynamic, particularly if you're an angsty late teen or early 20-something. And you probably hate yourself anyway.
So, okay. Something I've been thinking about in the milieu of games where you play as bad people, or in the sort of creative zone where you write about terrible things happening and people making terrible choices, and where the reader's like, no, don't go in that attic. No, can't you? Don't go with him. He clearly has Rohypnol in his car. It's very, very entertaining to, in the imagination, indulge our worst natures, to embrace, if you want to call it the Jungian shadow, I can't stop you. The rejected part of yourself. It's like, well, what if I was a real asshole? What if I didn't care if people around me got hurt? Let's play that out and see where it goes. And something I've been thinking about with this is that, this is particularly in terms of horror stuff where, you're going to the bottom floor of the human psyche in horror. You are seeing the worst and deliberately engaging with it. And I've met so many horror writers and horror fans who are sweet, friendly, generous, compassionate to a fault, give you the shirt off their back. And it feels like they use horror to externalize what is bad about themselves and get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this but there are other people who use it to just sort of wallow, right? And that, they're enjoying it in their fiction and they're enjoying it in their real life. Wow, neat. Okay, I'm going to go away now. And what this has made me think about is people whose work is full of sensitive, caring, compassionate characters who really understand and make these sacrifices. And I'm like, are they creating characters they want to be like, or are they externalizing stuff they don't want to have to deal with? You think about this, I think about this in the context of these creators who have created these beloved works of fiction with these noble characters, and then you find out, oh, he's a sex pest, man, and not just like in the mild, annoying, wave him away from your ear way, like the gross way.
Well, I found that there's no correlation between an artist's activities and their work. I just, the most saccharine, cutesy stuff can have horrible people, and the most, deranged, and then you have like Junji Ito, who is just that does the most deranged kind of horror, and he's just a living, kitten.
By
just a
all
nice
reports, the nicest man you will ever meet. That's what I mean by someone who has externalized his horror. It's why would he need to be gross? His grossness is out.
But I mean, there are people who do horror who are also, gross. It's just a land. But speaking of gross things,
back to vampires. I do think that this game is pretty robust in adjusting itself for not just, we're all going to be vampire head knockers. It's the badge with fangs.
Mm-hmm.
But you could have one guy who's like, I just want to beat up on child molesters. You can have another guy who's like, I'm going to take over Elysium, and you, my child molester head battering friend, shall be my strong right fist. And then you'll have a third player who's like, but is it right to take over Elysium, or is the entire structure corrupt? Can we, the devil's pawns, create anything that is not turned to the devil's ends?
Mm-hmm.
And that this can actually work pretty well. Everyone can get what they want out of they can get the particular kind of scenery chewing that they like. And moreover, I think it's a pretty friendly setup for allowing them to bleed into one another. That, the head knocker after 8 sessions is like, oh, I see how politics works. I'm going to screw over this guy instead of just beating him up. And then I'll grin at him and he won't be able to do anything about it. Oh, yeah, politics is fun.
Yeah.
And at some point, the Elysium guy is like, wow, I just ate my own granddaughter. I just ate my own granddaughter? Why? And I feel like I should feel a lot worse about that than I do. I feel worse about not feeling bad than I do about having done what I did. I'm spitting out, man. And suddenly the angst guy's like, I warned you all along that this was the dark path you tread upon. And you have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's built in, it's structurally in there, all of that stuff, because Vampire was, back in 1991, the first game that did character classes as lifestyle. Essentially, the Bruiger, the Gangrel, all the rest of it. You've got to work together, but you hate these guys because they're diametrically opposed to you, and each one of them kind of represents a different lifestyle that one of your player group or one or more of your player group will probably associate with. And it really works, and it was hugely imitated, particularly in the 90s, and other games still continue to pick up and run with it these days.
What games do you see doing that, James?
Today, I'm blanking. I'm kind of annoyed. The one that always leaps to mind, and I wish it wouldn't, is a horrible thing called Immortal, which wanted to be Vampire so hard.
I remember that. The first game book I ever saw with a cover that was clearly composed in Photoshop. And look at that cover for Photoshop of its era. I'm sure it aged poorly.
Yes. Shall we speak later of the artwork in Vampire 5th Edition?
Yeah, let's first talk about like a bit of the core mechanics and how the game does what it does.
This is I looked at these mechanics and this is the advantage of having 4 previous editions to fuck around and find out about things. And now it looks like it what did my notes say? Pretty well-evolved dice pool with bits and bobs you can engage for drama or stakes. Stakes.
Yes.
Or conveniently ignore if everyone's having a good time just vibing along. Every die in your pool has a 50-50 chance of being a success or a failure. That doesn't change.
Specifically, it's a D10 attribute plus skill. Roll number D10s, you need a 6 or higher. Equipment and modifiers can change how many dice you're rolling.
Sometimes you increase the number of success. The GM increases the number of successes you need to get. And sometimes the GM decreases your pool. And I'm like, maybe you could have just picked one of those. But whatever. It's clearly not broken. I mean, or if it is broken, it's subtly broken in a way that did not make itself apparent to me. I'm like,
There are a couple of modifiers to the basic mechanics that I do like. One, in terms of you do get criticals on rolling at least 2 10s.
That seemed fiddly to me.
Yeah, it seemed a little fiddly to me, but I do like that if your roll includes any successes but fails, you may win at a cost, which I think is a nice way of doing that. And then you do have willpower to help you automatically succeed. And then later on, there are...
love your meta currency.
I do love my meta currency.
Why don't you just marry a meta currency, Ross?
I'll spend a fate point and do so. Yeah. But I also do like that there are what they have messy criticals, which we can get into a little later. But like there are ideas that you do add in dice representing your hunger. And if those help you critical, well, then you succeed, but maybe not in the way you want to, or maybe it's not really a success anymore because...
The good news is I got that locked door open.
Yeah.
The bad news is that guy on the other side is now all over everything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can still read the papers that were in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I do like integrating that, the nature of your the beast into the core mechanics. In terms of characters, you also not only like one thing I do like, I really like is normally you'd pick your character, your attributes, you assign them and your discipline, your skills, and then you pick a clan or not a clan, and that determines your supernatural powers called disciplines. And that's pretty similar to previous editions, but you also pick your predator type, which is how you hunt for blood. And like that was obviously not in the old World of Darkness, but like, it's just driving home that you got to eat every night.
It's eat or go hungry, buddy. And if you go hungry long enough, you're going to eat.
Yeah.
So you can eat on your terms, or you can just eat whatever is around. And when what you eat is less a whatever than a whomever, that has complications. I liked that when you open the book up, the very first thing you see on the end papers is a list of victims you can randomly roll. And I'm like, yes, this is not just useful. It's a statement that drives home that, that's a person. You're eating a person. And some of the mechanics, the stuff with thin blood alchemy, it's like, to get your special power unlocked, you don't just need blood from whomever. You need choleric blood, which means your victim has to be happy.
That's what I really like, is having that different blood. The emotional state of the victim matters a lot. That is something that, I don't, was that in Vampire the Requiem? I'm not familiar with.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So like, I really like that addition because again, now it's even... So much of the game is going to be like on the grind of just feeding, at least for new characters, like, it's like, you're a monster. How do you be a monster? Like just the nuts and bolts of it.
Sometimes I generate characters for the games we talk about. I thought about it for this. I didn't get around to it. But the one I was thinking of is I'm like, okay, you have a guy who set himself up as kind of a new age guru healer. And it's like, okay, my victims are people that I have conned into paying me $100 for a massage acupuncture moxibustion treatment. And I'll just massage them till they're really relaxed, stick some needles in, do a little cupping, take a bite, tell them to push fluid. This is why they tell you to push fluids after you get a massage. And
that's one of the archetypes of Predator, the Osiris. You have a cult or a church or you're a celebrity.
So, I'm like, hey, it's all right. It's right there. I'm not as smart and novel as I think I am. Cool.
Yeah. It's great. So I mean, in terms of like, again, the centrality of like the nature of being a vampire, which again, the old World of Darkness totally brushed aside. Even in the video game I mentioned, Bloodlines, there's just random mortals you can go up and feed to, and as long as you're not doing it in side of the certain characters, you were fine. Yeah, they're just little walking power ups for your characters.
It's like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, exactly. And you can then, of course, you develop like a character relationship map. And then as a group, you also do develop it's by default, Vampire's always been city focused. Like there's one city that you're hanging out in. although it does support like nomadic campaigns where you're wandering around. But your group, it was also a very Vampire's always been a very ensemble focused game because they have coteries, and coteries are your little group of other player character, murder hobos.
It's your clique in the high school of monsters.
Yes, it very much is.
Here at this lunch table, we feed only through ethically sourced mortals. Move along, Bruja.
So yeah, you pick a city, and then you sort of like, as a group, sort of develop like what's going on in the city. And the person running the game has a lot of tools that they can sort of highlight, or sort of put in the background. Like there's obviously the conflict between the two main vampire factions, the Camarilla and the Anarchs. But there's also the Second Inquisition, which I believe is also new for this edition of the Vampire, which are the humans have figured out the spooks, the CIA, Nice Black Agents is happening to your characters. Yeah. So.
Nice Black Agent by Ken Hite.
I was going to say, I'm shocked to see that a game about vampires developed by Ken Hite has a ton of spies in it.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah.
With a feather, you could knock me over.
I do like that, and that they have their own terminology for it. They call vampires blank bodies, and like that's something. Obviously, that's sort of the cudgel you use if your player character is like, I'm just going to drink this guy right in public. I don't care who has a phone. Vampires can't use phones now, or they're not supposed to, because phones are made by humans, and humans have been phones are just a wiretap you carry around.
Well, and I did like that it's like, oh yeah, no, your body does not have the requisite conductivity to use a touchscreen unless you're a thin blood or have put some effort into faking being human. Yeah,
rousing the blood, which I also liked, that they have this specific mechanic to like, here's what you can do to pass for human, be warm and
that's been around for a bit.
Yeah, that's true.
They called it the blush of life before.
That's true. And also, of course, vampires very much a hierarchical. Like the high school thing is a very good thing because they talk about generations, from 16th, which are the thin bloods, to third generation, which is the antediluvians, which are mythic godlike beings.
You don't get to look at me, freshman.
I do like that they in the old world of darkness, it was all about what the antediluvians and the ones below them, the Methuselahs, and then the elders below them were doing. And the player, it was like, doing a superhero role-playing game in the DC or Marvel universe. Like, why are you bothering being a superhero when Superman can just solve all your problems for you?
If you screw this up, then the Flash is going to have to take 15 seconds out of his very busy day to put things right.
Yeah, but like in Vampire, there's always like some elder vampire who's just going to say no and not let you do it. And he's probably Rasputin. But I do remember, though, an old World of Darkness scenario that was literally a dungeon crawl in a Mayan pyramid, where the object of the scenario was to kill a Methuselah vampire who had just woken up. He was a Mayan vampire demigod, and you're like, go kill that guy. It was incredibly dumb.
You got it, boss. Tell my sire I love her.
For this edition, they have what they call the Beckoning, I think, where
that was in Time of Judgment stuff. So Old World of Darkness, as they were like winding it down, is the idea that, the Methuselahs have risen like Cthulhu and are kicking each other's asses all over the Middle East. And they're like, okay, kids, come to daddy. Come here. Time for you to help me fight Ravnos.
No, you just made me remember that like Old World of the Darkness really did become Superheroes with Fangs, because that was the meta plot, the height of the meta plot. And there was a whole thing about how Ravnos awoken, and the mages...
The Week of Nightmares.
The Week of Nightmares, and the mages had to use a magical nuke they took from Wrath the Oblivion and kill Ravnos. It was just like a WWE Super Slam, like, kind of...
cracking the foundations of reality and allowing Demon the Fallen to get written.
Yeah, exactly. It was just this over the ridiculous... Like, what's the point of being a character where you're just watching these major NPCs doing all the cool things?
There was a tremendous degree of saltiness among the fandom about the meta plot.
Yeah.
I mean, people talked about the meta plot like it was the boogeyman, that, the meta. Yeah. a new book's going to come out and the meta plot is going to invalidate everything you've done in the last 6 months of play. And it was not entirely unjustified that, I mean, you could always ignore it, but it's like, I don't feel like paying $20 for a book that I'm going to ignore.
I mean, there are people who would. They love, keeping up with the meta plot, but
love complaining about stuff on the internet.
Yes. I think the thing is, this edition has learned from that.
Yes.
And has just made it kind of more of a toolkit approach where you could say, here are these core elements of the game, but you don't have to use all of them and just do whatever makes sense for your group.
If the power of the elders is a blockade to your collective fun, that elder just woke up last night and is like, must go to Phrygia. Where is Phrygia now? I don't think Phrygia's been around for a couple millennia, boss. Find Phrygia. I shall also require 10 virgins to slake my thirst with their blood and a boat to go to Phrygia. Yeah, okay. We're going to get right on that 10 virgins boat. Check. Do you care who's prince while you're gone?
Yeah. Or if you want to have the elder hang around, you can. Yeah. So,
yes.
Yeah. I quite like this approach of like, there's a canon setting, but like it's not fixed. Just highlight what you want. It's sort of a middle ground between the total toolkit approach of, say, like Wild Talons, and then this is the one true event. You must be bystanders in your own game of the old meta plot. So I kind of like that.
Okay. You've just put your thumb on the point that hurts, which is bystanders in your own game. And this is one of those disadvantages of being a game that came out in 1991 when we hadn't figured everything out yet. And it's like, oh no, you can't do that. People don't mind if terrible consequences befall their characters. They will actually really get into that. It's like, oh, I've painted myself into this corner and now my character's screwed. I have to do something truly monstrous or have something truly monstrous done to me. I'm going to be talking about this for the next decade until everyone who knows me is tired about it. Whereas if you deprotagonize them, they'll be like, that's the worst game ever. Something mildly monstrous happened to my character and I didn't even care because I hadn't asked for it. If I do something and the mousetrap slams shut on my hand, now the pain is rich and meaningful. But if a mousetrap just slams down on my hand, I'm like, man, that just hurts. So this is the masochism of gaming, which all horror gamers to some extent probably kind of dig.
But, I mean, you're saying it made these mistakes. We hadn't worked this stuff out. Vampire was, when it came out, it was groundbreaking. It was the first really proper You Are the Monsters game. There had been a couple of vague fantasy ones, but this was the first one. It was contemporary. It was major archetypes, putting you at the heart of it. And it was, the whole system was geared around storytelling. I mean, they called it the storyteller system. Mechanically, maybe not, but the book, even first edition, said, you are the storyteller, this is a game about telling stories, and emphasized that over and over and over again until people believed it. They were the first people, and I was saying this on the last live stream we did, you're allowed to make mistakes if you're the first. You're allowed to make those mistakes, and Vampire was making a lot of mistakes, but they were the first people to be making them in the mass market. And it's hard to, I mean, for those who weren't there, this was probably the first proper challenger that D&D has had in terms of the top-ranking system, the one that really took people's imagination in a major, and was verging on the mainstream as well. People were talking about it in the mainstream.
Aaron Spelling TV show, yo.
Yeah, and plus the Underworld movies, which are just the World of Darkness. Yeah, let's be honest, I believe there was a lawsuit. I don't care how the lawsuit went.
Are they any good? I've never seen it.
They're pretty mindless action. Like we have Blade at home. Like, it's not as good as Blade, the first two Blade movies, but yeah.
The second Blade movie, in my opinion, is just head and shoulders above the first Blade movie.
That's the Del Toro one, the second one?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The one where his complete head opens up and you're like, oh, did I just see that? And if you could rewind, you rewind it and you gasp again.
Yeah.
A friend of mine described the first Blade movie as seeing Wesley Snipes kick the crap out of your snotty 12-year-old older brother. I mean, it's satisfying, but it's not challenging. They did not have a sufficient villain.
I don't know. I don't care. I just love seeing Wesley Snipes, and of course, rest in peace, Chris Christopherson, one of the best mentor / sidekicks in an action movie. They were absolute legends of that movie, and of course, Wesley one liner in that movie. Anyways, we're getting off topic. We should get back to Vampire.
We should get back to who I have an answer for who plays it how. That plays into a little bit of the historical track we've been on, and I'm like, I would guess that a lot of legacy gamers in the aging demographic probably a little more smooth and sophisticated because they're not teens, who can take this game that, like I said, can carry a lot of different tones and a lot of different focuses for attention. And that, if you've been playing Vampire for 15 years, 20 years, you probably know how you like it, how you want to set those proportions of politics to, I'm just going to be an actual monster and do terrible things, to, I'm going to feel really bad about my terrible, monstrous things. So, James, did you ever watch the TV show Being Human in the British one?
Yes. The good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
The good one, because I didn't watch the American one, but what I remember about it is it was like a season and a half of a vampire character just keeping himself under control and, actually being kind of wise and compassionate and a moderating impulse, and then shit goes wrong and he kills a train car. Him and his bad influence girlfriend just sick out and murder everybody in a crowded tube car under London. And I'm like, that was, I remember that as a shocking turn. And yet at the same time, they'd set up the whole time. It's like, yeah, I'm constantly trying to keep it down, man. I'm constantly trying to keep it together because I know bad things happen when I don't keep it together.
Yeah.
And so,
Being Human was very much, it was the World of Darkness on a BBC budget. It was,
ouch.
There's a vampire and there's a werewolf and there's a ghost and they share a flat. And yeah, most of it happens in the flat because it's a BBC budget.
Or the hospital where the werewolf and...
Yeah. It will probably turn out to have been Channel 4 or something. But yeah, it was a British budget. It was a low budget show. And initially played for laughs. It was essentially a sitcom with some rom-com elements. And yeah, it having
very gradually built towards the tube car.
It went to some interesting places. Yeah,
I think that's it, though. It is. I think that's the main. It's called the storyteller system, right? It's about telling stories. The people. The core of this game is telling a story about a vampire. Of a human who becomes a monster and how they deal with it. So the emotion, the inner pathos is core to it. And of course, back then it was, the 90s more about the cool powers and the lore and the secrets. Yeah, and I think this game is very much focused on that. Or this edition of it is very much focused on like, I want to see what this tragic little person, what happens to them. So I think it is, being human, going from like, I'm still basically human, right? To well, there's a lot of dead people now, and I don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah. So
why is my only feeling that was delicious?
Yeah, exactly. That Descent.
But interesting things. I just googled it, Being Human. Everyone remembers Russell Tovey as the werewolf, Guy Flanagan as John Mitchell, and Sawyer the ghost was played by Andrea Risborough. Academy Award nominated and Andrea Risborough.
Isn't this how the BBC has done everything that's not a costume drama since Ultraviolet. Oh, we're going to have special effects that look like they were done as a shoebox diorama.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the acting is gonna be chef kiss.
Yeah. Because we have the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company and stuff. Mm-hmm. Blake 7, literally starships made out of shampoo bottles and hairdryers. Mm-hmm. But Blake is played by Gareth Thomas, an RSC actor who I saw playing Duke Orsino in 12th Night, and who was mesmerizingly good. That's the BBC. That's what makes the BBC so much BBC drama.
I think that's the difference in types of gamers. Like, there are gamers who are interested in the escapist power fantasy, and while but then there's the gamers who are like, I saw some other players on another Discord server recently talking about, oh, which character you want to play in this scenario? Here are the premates. Well, this personality disorder speaks most to me. That's the one I'm most interested in role playing as. But this one's really interesting. I don't know which trauma is the which trauma should I have? Like, that's the thing that they respond to is the pain and the trauma and the bad things happening to their characters. They want the bad things to happen because that's interesting, that's dramatic, and that has the most emotional punch to it, rather than like, I got a new +5, sword or whatever. So,
which one has the highest potence?
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly.
Which one will allow me to do the most dramatic combats? It's more about the inner conflict than the external conflict these days.
I have heard the argument put forth, and there's no way to prove or disprove this, but I've heard people say that the reason Vampire, particularly in its early editions, was so focused on the politics and, I need to gain prestige and I need to manipulate people and I need to put them in binds and blackmail them and bribe them, was because the combat system was bad. And people were like, I just don't want to have to spend another
It was a slog.
90 minutes.
It was not a fun combat system.
Through this guy's levels of protection before, I'll just manipulate him instead. That seems vampire-y.
One thing I did note is the experience system is incredibly slow for this edition. You normally only get like 3 experience points per session. And the amount of experience you would need to increase one of your disciplines, you're limited. The character gets 3 points to distribute among 3 disciplines usually. And you could put all 3 into one, and each dot of a discipline gives you more substantial powers. To get that 4th dot, which they do describe, the 4th and 5th dots, you can't do that as a starting character, and you would have to play literally dozens of sessions in order to get enough experience by rules as written, in order to get that 4th dot. So they're basically there, but you're not going to realistically do that unless you house rule something, or you start out as a more powerful character. Like, your characters are largely static.
Vampires who don't change and grow, you don't say.
Yeah. So that could be thematic, but like, I could see players being frustrated. Like, if I've been playing this campaign for a year, I should feel some change in my dude. Especially because usually there'll be escalating threats, right? Like, vampire hunters will start closing in, or other adversaries, and certainly their humanity will drop, and they'll be more likely to freak out, go into frenzy at the wrong moment. World of Dark's always had very slow advancement rule.
Well, and that's maybe not as bad a thing. I mean, who has not played a game where advancement is pretty quick, and you're like, oh, yeah, out of the 17 different powers my character has, I forgot I had one that would work really well in this situation, and that the GM maybe was counting on me remembering.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is that.
And so it's like, yeah, okay, you're a fast vampire. You're going to be a fast vampire. I don't need to plan out for you to suddenly become a sexy vampire.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about you spontaneously becoming, one of the "come to me, my feral minions" vampires. If you don't start out that way, you're probably not going to spontaneously bring rats to the yard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is also your characters are never going to be a Dracula type vampire, a singular threat to a large group of people. Your characters are, much weaker than that. And that's obviously, obviously for ensemble play where you're still trying to be human, that makes sense. But yeah, I think every single rule in this game is oriented towards this sort of like very personal and political game, because it's not, while you do fight, it's not the point of the system. It's about dealing with the same people for a large part for a long period of time.
God, it's like an office.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Camarilla is extremely hierarchical.
I don't really care about Patty's kids, but man, she is a lot easier to get along with if you let her talk about them for 5 minutes every day.
Yeah. For me, if I was playing it, I would be interested in doing a game. I mean, my love of horror role playing is usually investigative. I want to know what the mystery is. I want to know what the secret is. And you can't do that in here. Certainly, there are a lot of mysteries to unravel.
You got lore books.
Yeah, lore books. Yeah, of course. That would be my... but playing someone who's fighting monsters or investigating them and also a monster themselves.
I agree completely. I mean, one of the things I remember, I bought Vampire First Edition, or was given it, I'm not sure, at Gen Con 1991 on the White Wolf stand. And opening it and reading it felt like being invited into this world of mysteries and secrets as if one had just been taken in. And sired or whatever, I forget the appropriate term.
Embraced, James. They call it being embraced.
Okay, it was 1991. I wasn't getting embraced very much. Mm-hmm. But 5th edition just feels like this stuff is known. It felt in the same way we've talked about this before with Alien. Alien is a known universe, and the role-playing game just describes it. I felt Vampire 5th was describing a universe that we are familiar with and just kind of codifying it in rules. And it comes from, I think, the fact that the role-playing games comes from the second age of vampire lore and vampire stories. First age being Polidori, Bram Stoker, classic Dracula, Nosferatu, all the rest of it. The vampire as an implacable force, the vampire as an other, the antagonist. Age 2 is Anne Rice, basically. It's the angsty vampire, it's the person trapped in their immortality. The vampire as protagonist. Age 3 is the sparkly vampire, which is not really vampires at all. They are not bad people. Do we talk much about their blood sucking? Probably not really. But, the concept of vampires is sexy. And then age 4 is the crap vampires, what we do in the shadows, and it's speeding up, and pretty soon we'll be getting a new age of vampires every 36 minutes. And there are role-playing games for all of them, whichever one you want to play.
By 2025, we predict a double vampire event.
Yeah. So, we'll be getting... Yeah. I can see what you mean. We didn't even mention one of the major factions in Vamp. Yeah, like, the lore of this setting is sort of like a remix of the old World of Darkness. They've sort of streamlined it, but they take a lot of the elements. Like, there's another major faction I haven't even mentioned, the Sabbat, which seems...
Who are the ones who are like, why would I act like a person? I'm not a person.
Yeah.
Why I need to drink blood every night. Why would I not adapt to that optimally?
Yeah. Yes, it's like, I enjoy eating steak. Why would I spend my days pretending to be a cow?
Yeah.
Stop crying.
Yeah.
We're here doing this is happening.
Yeah, it's kind of like back in the old World of Darkness, you could do a Sabbat campaign, and that was like the equivalent of we're all playing evil characters in this D&D campaign.
We're all Death Knights.
Yeah.
I'm an assassin.
Yes. I do want to mention, I think one of the most iconic things Vampire's done is the idea that there's players choose from instead of character classes, in Vampire, you have clans, which aren't just in a collection of abilities, your disciplines, but there's also personalities and sub-personality, archetypes within these, and they represent
which you can play against.
Yeah.
Yeah. With varying degrees of success. If you are embraced as a Nosferatu, you have this curse of hideousness where you can't really hide that you are a major threat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try and play against that, if you're going to be a social Nosferatu, that's going to be your whole thing, is you're going to be like, I'm the one Nosferatu that people don't roll, that even other vampires are they see you coming in like, oh man, this guy, you will never get that smell off your clothes, man. Whereas, it's like, oh, I'm going to be a Toreador. The Toreador are the sexy vampires, right? The ones where they just look at you and are like, hey, you're in love with me now. And you're like, oh, does it show, my darling? And so if you want to be the Toreador who plays against type, it's like, no, I'm going to be the ethical Toreador who only feeds from people who are into it when they haven't been mind whammied.
I have to ask, out of the clans in this book, Bruja, Gangrel, Machiavians, Dothraki, Toreador, Tremere, Ventru, and then Caedus and the Thin Bloods, who are obviously not, those last two aren't clans, but they're still character types. What would you pick?
Ooh.
I'll go first. I'll pick a Malkavian. They're certainly interesting. You can make it more unique character, I think. I do know in that's what I played in the Vampires, the Masquerade, the Bloodlines game, because they get a lot of unique dialogue options, including talking to the television for extended conversations, which it was pretty amusing.
I would probably go Toreador for, wish fulfillment. As an author, the appeal of having everyone tell me how great I am and be fascinated by me just intrinsically bears a powerful attraction.
Mm-hmm. James, what about you?
I probably wouldn't, because as I've said before when we did 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, I'm not interested in vampires as protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
I may have been at some point, but Vampire was never a system that spoke to me particularly when it came out, and there's nothing really in 5th edition that has changed that. I read through the 13 different clans in this book, and none of them spoke to me. And ideally in a role-playing game, you want all of them to speak to you. You want to go, I could play that, or I could play that, or if I wanted to, you want to be pulled in different directions.
That was my experience with Exalted 1st edition. As I was reading, I'm like, I could be one of these guys. I could be one of these guys.
But again, you see it all the time.
Which I never got to play.
You see it in computer role-playing games all the time. It's like, I want to play, I'm going to have to replay this game. And it'll be the same game, but you'll just kill things in different ways.
Yeah.
But you want to, a good, well-designed game. And I think we mentioned the artwork earlier. I think part of the problem I have with this edition, the art is awful. So much of it is treated photographs. But it's what those treated photographs show. It's poses. It's people posing as vampires rather than doing things as vampires. There's no sense of these being people who are involved in stories. They're just kind of posing. All of it, apart from, and I will say, there are 2 or 3 pieces of some of the worst art I've seen in any RPG ever. And 1st edition Vampire was not great in that regard. Everyone goes, the Timothy Bradstreet full pages. Yeah, there were like 8 of those in the entire book. But the rest of it was...
1st edition have a mime on the back?
1st edition, I'm holding it up. No, it had a sheet of marble. Like the front. The front was the rose. But I mean, the Bradstreet...
You might be sworn there was a previous version or something.
Might be the mask, the art, mask.
The art in 1st edition is really not great. For some reason, my copy falls open to one of the worst pictures, which I will scan and upload.
We could do a whole live stream about the bad World of Darkness art. I mean,
we could. But I have
mistakes have been made.
Yeah.
I have a point here. All the art, all those 1/4-page, 6th-page pieces are linked. They tell a story. It's like there is a graphic novel unfolding every time you turn a page of the rulebook. And they tell a story that goes through the entire book. It's not on every single page, but it unfolds as the captions to this story. I've not seen any other RPG do that. It really sets a tone. And what it says is, this is a narrative. This is about the stories of your characters and the characters you will meet. It's about narrative. The art in 5th edition is incredibly static and unimaginative. And yeah, these are very cool vampires, but they're not doing anything. And I felt enormously let down, and they did not interest me as characters, either that I wanted to play or even that I wanted to find out any more about.
Wow. I did not have nearly that negative reaction. I did not have a strong reaction one way or the other, except looking at the drawn parts. Every one of the clans has a series of drawn, these are what characters from this would look like. And I was looking through those. I'm like, I've never seen anyone look like any one of these ever in my life. I did not find it nearly as off-putting as James clearly did.
It wasn't off-putting, it just didn't draw me in.
The best piece of art depicting a vampire is Bill Paxton's character in the Catherine Bigelow film Near Dark. In the bar scene.
Yes.
That's it. Like that. And in fact, it was so good that it was actually traced for one image in a World of Dark in an old Vampire the Masquerade book. Yeah, I see your point about like a lot of static pose. A lot of the lighting in some of these images looks very studio photography, not like people in a real place. I do want to say, James, I think your character type in Vampire the Masquerade would be a thin blood trying to become human by tracking down the person who embraced them so they can regain their humanity. So you could be the vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire, and that's the whole game, is trying to like become human again. Because that's actually a valid path in this edition, which was not previously available in Vampire, so I find that
there was always Golconda, but it was presented as like,
mythical.
Yeah. If you want to have if you want to spend 3 arcs doing whatever all the other people are doing, and then also on the side going to Golconda night school, then you might get it. And that would be the conclusion of the entire game.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. And now Thin Bloods can do it. But you have to be a Thin Blood to do it, which...
But yeah, I can see your point. The art, it didn't stand out to me. It did not really evoke anything in me. But previous World of Darkness, art did. Back, but again, I was younger, so...
The Bradstreets.
Yeah, the Bradstreets,
man.
Yeah, photography in RPGs is a difficult thing to pull off, to be fair.
I don't know. I think we did a good job with it in Unknown Armies.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's difficult. It's hard, and I don't think they quite got it.
But then when you're paying that much for an RPG rulebook, you want more than functional. The other thing, briefly, I'm going to say is that this is another one of those RPG rulebooks that does the extraordinary job of squeezing a 300-page game into a 400-page book, and I wish they'd stop.
Yeah,
it felt like very wide margins, more art than it needs. It's this is not a cheap book. I have borrowed this one. Thanks, Callum. I've borrowed the deluxe hardback, and the binding is lovely. The cover is lovely. This doesn't have the photo-manipulated cover. It has actually a cover that's very reminiscent of the first edition, which was the classic green marble. This one has a kind of silvery marble with indented text. It's a beautiful book. But then you get to the typesetting and stuff, and it uses, just briefly, this is not a major critique, but it uses a very light font that's actually quite hard to read. It's the type of font that you use when you're trying to save on ink costs.
Ouch.
Which is kind of
This is a complaint for gaming's aging demographic. Oh, the font's hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on I hit page 118, and there's a reference to Dios, and it's like, Dios is this is a game term I haven't come across. Oh, wait. What you've done is you've chosen a typeface that when you type D10s reads as Dios. That is a mistake. That should have been caught. They should not have used that typeface. It's a D10 based system. The word comes up more than once.
Yeah.
All right.
Fair enough. I caught a couple of things about the layout. The alternating between 3 and 2 columns, and the giant margins. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Especially at the top and the bottom. That's like almost like over an inch of white space on almost every single page. It's, I know that, horror vacui, the fear of white space is a thing, but like there's also the opposite, like maybe a little too much white space here.
Yeah.
So yeah. There's also like they have some full page art of like 128 and 129 for examples of roles. This could have been, the text is like 1 page. It's very spread out. So, yeah, it makes you wonder if they were trying to go for a page count rather than a word count.
If you don't like wide margins, don't look at Not the End. You heard about this game? It's a bag building game, and it's interesting and it's not bad. But man, when the guy I borrowed it from, he's like, "You'll get through this pretty quick." I'm like, "Well, I'll get it back to you." He's like, "Once you start reading it, you'll be done reading it pretty soon." So that is my standard for widest. Widest margins, most white space.
Yeah.
Now I have to find it just so I can see that.
Yeah.
So I can have another role-playing game layout I hate.
It's not a bad game. I don't know. Maybe you'll look at it and you're like, no, this is beautiful. This is... Because even with the wide margins, it's a pretty small book. Because it's a pretty fast, simple system.
Ooh.
Does either of you know if... I don't know how to say this without sounding sort of sarcastic. Does Vampire 5th have a youth fandom? Or is it mostly...
Oh, sure. There's a lot of younger people playing it. Like,
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
I think it's a very popular game on like live streams and actual plays. I know that.
Oh, neat.
That might be more because White Wolf has done a good job supporting them, and they have the resources in their marketing department to do that. But yeah, no.
Or maybe because people being super angsty and manipulative and making terrible, violent choices makes for good podcasts.
Yes, exactly.
Something that, as I was examining this edition, I was feeling like, okay, it's done a 5th edition correctly, where it has learned from the missteps, of which there were many, of the old World of Darkness, and I'm like, the World of Darkness never really fired its fans, Games Workshop style. Warhammer 40k notoriously reinvents itself periodically, so that if you want to stick with it, you got to throw away and rebuy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased, but it has always felt to me like the World of Darkness wanted to be a great game. That every World of Darkness game was like, I want this to be its most actualized version of itself. It has ambitions higher than let's move the most units. Let's be the biggest commercial success. I feel like that comes through, and I feel that there are some other games, I'm not going to name names, but if you said, you realize that if you were 20% less playable, you would actually be 50% more saleable, and they'd be like, well, we'd be fools not to. And I never got that vibe off World of Darkness designs. I mean,
the best proof for that is looking like at Appendix 3 on page 419, which has advice for considerate play, which has, character and player identity, fascism play. It is not a fascist-friendly game. If you're a neo-Nazi, alt-right, or whatever, we urge you to put this book down and call someone you trust to talk about where you went so wrong in life. But then it also has a discussion of sexual violence in games, calibration techniques like lines and veils, fade to black, stoplight system. It has a list of further reading. It talks about how to deal with these, like, you're dealing with emotionally intense things, like, say, a character with a traumatic background that connects to your real life. And maybe you need to, and you feel things and it's too much for you as a person. Here's some techniques for sort of dealing with that. Or if you want to explore these, here's some safety tools for you. So I think, like, which was obviously the idea of this was like non-existent back in the 90s. And of course we also have the mature content warning on the inner front cover. This game is made with that. Of course, White Wolf as a company has made many real life mistakes that we're not going to get into. Just looking at this book alone, like, they are aware of these things and they are advancing this. And so, like, I think the older fans, from what I understand, stay with the old edition. Like, they keep reprinting them. You can get them as print on demand, I think. So they're just sticking with their old World of Darkness. There's a lot of, like, my favorite clan is no longer in the game. What happened to the Giovanni? No, But yeah, like, that's proof that this text of the game is at least trying to, like, square the circle of, like, you're a monster, but you're still a person playing a game. So, think about that before you go too far. It's a fine line to walk, for sure.
Yeah.
And yes, and none of us has used the word bleed yet.
No.
Double entendre.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is what I've said before, and I've put it in my own manuscript, is that if you want to keep a sharp knife, you need a good sheath. And if you want to touch on these deep, dark, sometimes painful issues, if you want to dig around in the messiest parts of the human psyche, you need to be ready for that and not just assume, everyone will be able to laugh this off as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone even wants to laugh it off as a joke.
Yeah, this is definitely, out of all the games we talked, this is one of the, this is up here with like Bluebeard's Brides in terms of like setting, talking about it before you play the game, about what's going to happen, you know, where using these safety tools. So yeah, James.
It's interesting because you've got all that for the, you know, the kind of the style of play, the tone of play, and then at the same time, you know, and these improved, much slicker, much better mechanics, or, you know, tuned up versions of the mechanics from the 90s. But it still feels to me, at least in terms of its setting and in terms of its rules, it's the best possible version of a game from the 1990s. And there are moments it almost seems to buy into that. The opening words of the main text in the concepts chapter is, "You're dancing to a relentless techno beat in the press of warm, sweaty bodies." And I'm pretty sure that's in one of the first edition ones as well. It's like the 1990s want their nightclub scene back. And then there's another one. There are some weird tonal points. It talks about photocopying character sheets. It talks about buying dice at a game store. And yes, you can.
People still buy. People still do.
Yeah.
People still do, but it's not where most people do. Most people seem to buy their dice on Etsy these days. And you don't photocopy a character sheet. You download the PDF and print it off, or you use a digital version. It does, in many ways, still feel like it's touching base with 1990 and the 1990s and people who were playing the game back then. Yes, there are new people coming in, but it wants to reassure the people that the commies are still in the system, that it's, you know, it's still the game that they lost their virginity to back in you know, in the mid 90s in college. It's the role-playing game that was playing on the radio. It's to stretch my stuff as far as it'll go. But yes, but tonally, I think it's buying much more into the interesting psychological stuff, which is driving different stories, better, richer stories. They're still, I think, second-generation vampire stories fundamentally, but they are better stories than the early editions of the game was able to produce.
You'd prefer second to Sparkly, right?
Oh yeah! Oh man! Don't touch me with them sparkly vampires.
You know what? I think the newest vampire is actually What We Do in the Shadows isn't even the newest vampire thing anymore. It's Interview with the Vampire, the TV show.
Oh, the
TV show.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but amazing things about it. I haven't seen it, but yeah.
I don't know how much it strays from the original source material.
I think it does quite a bit. I'm not sure though. It's I've heard very laudatory things about it, but. Yeah, and then of course we're going to see Nosferatu, you know, that version of the vampire myth. Yeah, I mean, you're right though. This is at its core still a legacy game. It still has to have 5th edition. Still has to resemble some sort of evolution, some sort of iteration of first edition. It can never. It still has to be about like the Camarilla and the clans and the politics of the city at night, and also dealing with the personal horror. They have dropped though the gothic punk element, which was that was the term, right, Greg? The original.
That was the term.
Yeah, that was how they were differentiating themselves from the D&D. You can only change it so much before it becomes a different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
This maintains the essence.
Yeah.
All right. My final thought was just, you know, the whole thing about how it always wanted to be not just a profitable game, but a great game. And I think you see that here. And I think in every iteration of it, you've seen the idea of what a great game is shift a little bit. So
yeah, I think
something to.
I don't think I can't be. That was always a thing that I thought about in Old World of Darkness. Was like, oh, I just make a stealth check and I found a hobo to eat. Great, moving on. Better go fight those Sabbat vampires.
Right.
And now it's the whole thing of like, you were a vampire, you were a predator, you were hurting people. This is first and foremost in this game. I don't know what else you could do with this setup. I don't know how else you could. I mean, aside from minor, I'm sure there's game balance issues with certain disciplines and things like that. No game system survives players, you know. Everybody's like, oh, here's the one combo, here's the one weird trick to defeat anything. But like, other than that, I don't know how you change this paradigm without coming up with a new paradigm for vampires. As an outsider, I think they kind of solved Vampire the Masquerade. Like, Yep, that's how it should work.
There it is.
Yeah.
Vampire the Masquerade is a solved problem.
And the solution is Night's Black Agents.
Well, you could do that.
I do just want to say, if I was younger, if I didn't have a family, if I had more time, I would think very seriously about setting up 2 simultaneous campaigns, Vampire the Masquerade on one side and Night's Black Agent on the other, in the same universe and on a collision course. The 2 campaigns running into each other. It may well have been done. Oh, Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, except I'd do it with Night's Black Agents, because as we've discussed previously, Night's Black Agents is really good.
Yeah, it would be hard to merge those game mechanics, though, because there's so much more meta agency in Night's Black Agents.
Yeah, I'm running it as 2 separate campaigns, except, there's
except they intersect.
Yeah.
That would be a hugely ambitious project.
Yes.
Tell us how it goes. If you try this at home, dear listener, tell us how it goes.
Yeah.
Oh,
please.
yeah.
So thank you all so much for listening. If you're still here at this point, our retention rate's pretty good for the podcast, but it's never 100%. We of course will be talking about a very different universe, but still has Tremere in it somehow. Ars Magica, the Grog's supplement, our next supplement book.
Wait,
yeah,
it's not Greg's.
No, Grog's.
No, Greg's is why you buy sausage rolls in the UK.
Grog's, the regular people in Ars Magica, they got their own book,
the Greek chorus.
Yeah, and we'll get to see what they're like, and but that'll be the next episode to look forward to. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you in the night. Bye. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If they don't have the traditional Bach toccata in this podcast, it's because of copyright YouTube hassles. So
I've got sorry. Can we close on an anecdote? Because one of the things that Vampire First Edition and possibly Second and a lot of the early World of Darkness was almost the books were known for song lyrics quoted at the starts of chapters and stuff like that, and kind of punk and gothic stuff like that. I have this on good authority from a White Wolf developer in the old days. When you quote stuff like that in a book, you are supposed to get clearance and pay for it, and song lyrics do not come cheap, and White Wolf never ever did that. To the extent that they realized at one point they had a problem and started to stop doing that. This developer of my acquaintance was in a conversation with somebody from the music industry and mentioned that this thing, I think I might have left White Wolf by this point, and the music industry guy was just, we know, we are well aware of that. We're also aware that if we come after you for what you owe us, you will go. White Wolf would have been bankrupted, and we thought that would be bad press, so we didn't.
Wow. Yeah. Kind
of love it.
I'm kind of surprised the music industry still had that restraint. Well,
Vampire was hot. There was a TV show. It's like, and then you blow up the publishing company because they're a bunch of idiots who didn't clear their copy.
Yeah.
It would be like kicking a tiny puppy in a tiny corset.
Yeah, it would take a lot longer to get to international political.
Nobody wants to see that.
But anyways, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.